Thank you again for coming along to the Workers' Party's Christchurch branch election campaign launch. I'm going to be talking about what the problem is with the mainstream parties, and I'm going to talk mainly about Labour and National. When I began thinking about this talk, I was thinking of doing it, I could talk about Labour and then National, or National and then Labour, but then I realised it would actually be easier to talk about them both at the same time, because the two parties are fundamentally similar. This isn't even a particularly controversial statement to make anymore. Earlier this year, broadcaster John Campbell compared the choice between Labour and National to choosing between Coke and Pepsi. Now we can see this in things like neither party's willingness to abolish or even alter the regressive goods and services tax, despite arguing over various other tax cuts. And we can also see it in the fact that after nearly a decade in power, Labour has not reversed National's 1991 benefit cuts. The policy consensus between Labour and National is obvious if we look at several recent law changes. We've seen the passage of the Criminal Disclosure Bill, which removes the need for unanimous jury verdicts and creates exemptions to double jeopardy, the legal defence that prevents people from being tried twice on the same set of evidence. And both wanting to appear sort of tough on crime, they voted for the Summary Offences Tagging and Graffiti Vandalism Bill, which increases tenfold the penalties for tagging and makes it illegal to sell spray paint to people under 18, something that could yet be found to violate the Bill of Rights Act. And earlier this year, they both voted to amend the Copyright Act, which has brought sort of New Zealand's copyright law more in line with the United States' draconian intellectual property laws. And perhaps of most concern is that both parties are supporting the passage of the immigration bill, which has been described as a human rights nightmare, as the law would give immigration officials greater powers of search and entry into businesses, private homes, as well with enhanced powers of search, seizure, detention without warrant, along with a number of other human rights concerns that have been highlighted in our paper The Spark and elsewhere. Then, of course, there's the issue of industrial relations, and this is supposedly where the big difference between these two parties lies. We can see, however, that in this instance, although, of course, Labour and National aren't exactly the same, as I've been arguing, they are fundamentally the same. Now, National has a reputation for shafting workers, of course, and that reputation is surely justified. New Zealand hasn't forgotten the Employment Contracts Act of the 1990s, and if we look at National in its current incarnation, they're led by a man who, while working for Merrill Lynch, was nicknamed the Smiling Assassin for his ability to lay off hundreds of workers and maintain a cherry disposition that John Key is still known for. But with this in mind, it's important to actually look at what National's industrial relations policies are and compare those with those of Labour. Now, National has stated it's not going to bring back the Employment Contracts Act, but retain Labour's Employment Relations Act, which actually makes perfect sense, as really the ERA is basically the Employment Contracts Act with the amendments of right of entry for union organisers and the ability to form multi-employer collective agreements. So this policy is not National adopting a Labour policy, but Labour retaining a slightly altered National policy and then National coming back in and, just not reversing the alterations. National's well-known no rights for 90-day policy, as it's been nicknamed, has been watered down a bit. When they tried to pass this as a private members bill in 2006, it was going to apply to all employers, and now they're saying the official policy is it will only apply to smaller employers. And National's also retaining 4 weeks annual leave. The only thing is they're allowing the 4th week to be traded for cash at employees' request. So while there are criticisms of these policies that have been brought out in recent weeks by the union movement and that sort of thing, and all these criticisms are valid, but really they're not terribly frightening policies, because basically they're just minor alterations on what is the status quo. So, excuse me. Okay, anyway. So if we look at what industrial relations is like now after, like I said, nearly a decade of Labour in power, unionisation in the private sector is only 12%. Wage increases are lagging behind inflation, particularly the high inflation that we've seen in recent months. There was a recent survey that actually showed that for workers at the bottom of the heap, such as cleaners, aged care workers, people in the hospitality industry, shop assistants, wages are actually dropping, so things are moving backwards. And that's before you even take into account the rate of inflation. Minimum wage in New Zealand right now is not even at the level that the International Labour Organisation says it should be, and this isn't an extremely radical organisation, so Labour's not even meeting a basic international standard. So in that way, neither Labour or National, of course, are offering a better deal for workers. And I'm going to leave it there and hand you on to our Christchurch East candidate, Paul Hopkinson, who's going to talk about the real alternative that's being offered by the Workers' Party.